In 1983, a talented young artist named Eleanor vanishes mysteriously, leaving behind only cryptic paintings and a single word: truth. 30 years later, her brother, Aiden, stumbles upon her forgotten journal and a map that leads him to a hidden church on the outskirts of their small town. What he uncovers will force him to confront a terrifying legacy, a dark force that has been sealed away for centuries, and a truth more deadly than he ever imagined. The town of Ashford was as forgotten as its inhabitants. Its streets, always shrouded in morning fog, never heard the sound of rushing cars or the hurried steps of people on their way. The locals, nearly all of them, went about their days in quiet routine, exchanging a few words at the market or at the diner on the corner, but soon falling into silence, returning to their homes. In this forgotten corner of the world, time moved slowly, if it moved at all. For Aiden Westbrook, Ashford had always been home, but was also a prison. He was born here, grew up among the same houses that hadn't changed in decades. His life in this town seemed predictable. Everything was in its place. The distant mountains, the river whose waters, as the old folks said, never change, and those same cobblestone roads that felt like they'd been laid long ago, no one ever in a hurry. Even if Aiden had wanted to leave Ashford, he wouldn't have been able to. This town knew him from the moment he was born. And despite all this constancy, the silence had become unbearable, especially after his sister disappeared. Eleanor had always been different from the rest of the town. She was the only one in the family who ever left an imprint on the local community, both as an artist and a musician. At just 18, she became not just a local celebrity, but, as some said, the promise of a grand future. Her paintings, full of unease and beauty, spoke of something deeper, something only few could understand. Each brushstroke of hers was full of meaning, as if every color, every streak on the canvas carried her soul. Aiden remembered how she used to play piano in their old house, sometimes repeating one melody until everything around them fell into long silences. But not in the way most musicians do. She was like the music she played, mysterious, boundless. It was just when her life seemed on the verge of taking off, where her first solo exhibition was set to open in Boston, that Eleanor disappeared. It all started with a phone call one winter night. Eleanor had been excited, but there was an underlying nervousness in her voice. She mentioned that everything was ready for the show, that it was all coming together. She ended the conversation with a simple promise: "I'll call you back once everything's packed." But she never did. The next morning, her apartment was empty. The police found no signs of forced entry or any disturbance in the room. The only thing left were scattered brushes, drops of paint on the floor, and an unfinished painting that had strange streaks, almost like rotting shadows. In the right corner of the painting, one word was written in bold letters: truth. Those who tried to understand what happened couldn't find any answers. No one knew where she had gone or what she had left behind. And within a week, the town had stopped talking about her disappearance. And though it was a tragedy for the Westbrook family, life in Ashford continued, as though nothing had happened. Aiden, however, couldn't forget. He tried, of course. He found solace in his work as a journalist, covering mundane town events, charity drives, school events, the occasional local crime that made headlines for a few days and then faded away. But there was always an empty space inside him, a gaping wound that no words or stories could heal. He lived in a house filled with memories of his sister, seeing the places where she once painted or played. The same canvases, the same music stand. Everything was unchanged, and he hated it. He tried to survive among these memories. Everyone in town knew he had lost his sister, but all they could offer him were empty condolences, words that felt as hollow as the town itself. It was several years before he returned to their old house. With their parents gone, only Aiden remained. The house, full of forgotten things and unspoken words, felt colder than ever. One evening, while sorting through the attic, he came across an old wooden box. Inside were Eleanor's writings, her old journal long forgotten. When Aiden opened it, he saw something unusual, notes written in her hand, scattered across the pages, drawings of local buildings, unclear diagrams, strange symbols mixed with cryptic phrases like, "It's still here," or "I can hear them." But it was one thing that caught his eye more than anything else. At the end of the journal, there was a map. It showed the location of an abandoned church in the forest, a place that seemed to have ties to something deeper, something buried in the history of the town. Aiden stood in the dim attic, the dust-heavy air pressing around him as he studied the old map. His fingers traced the edges of the paper, feeling the wear and tear time on the faded lines. The map was crude, drawn hastily as if it had been rushed, yet every detail seemed deliberate, as if Eleanor had known the significance of the place she was marking. The location was familiar, even though Aiden couldn't recall ever seeing it before. It led to the outskirts of Ashford, deep into the woods where the town's secrets lay buried beneath the heavy canopy of trees. It was an area the locals never spoke of, a place that seemed to have been deliberately forgotten. The forest had always felt imposing to Aiden, its shadows so thick they seemed to absorb the light, its silence unnerving. People rarely ventured there, and when they did, it was only for practical reasons, gathering firewood or sometimes hunting, though the animals in those woods had long since become scarce. But this map and Eleanor's cryptic note about the truth waiting at the end meant something different. It wasn't about the woods or the church. It was about what lay hidden there, waiting to be uncovered. Aiden's breath caught in his throat. He had never seen this part of the town, this hidden corner of Ashford. Eleanor had known something he hadn't. The journals he had found spoke of more than just art, more than music. It spoke of a connection between the land, the people, and something far older, something that had been buried for generations. Aiden could feel it now, an invisible weight pressing down on his chest, the same feeling he had experienced ever since she had disappeared. Something was unfinished, and now he had to finish it. He tucked the map into his coat pocket, closing the old wooden box with a soft thud, and made his way downstairs. The house creaked around him, familiar in a way that made his heart ache. He had avoided this place for years, not just because it reminded him of his sister, but because he had always known there was something else here, something that he had never wanted to confront. The last thing he wanted was to uncover more darkness, but the map, it was calling to him. Outside, the wind had picked up, howling through the trees as if urging him forward. Ashford was quiet, as it always was, but tonight the silence felt different, oppressive, like the town itself was holding its breath. The air was thick with tension, and as Aiden stepped outside, the chill seemed to cut straight through him. The road to the woods was long, winding through fog that had settled over the town like a blanket, muffling the world around him. Each step felt heavier, as though he was walking deeper into something he couldn't control, something that had always been there, lurking beneath the surface. The woods on the outskirts of town had always seemed like a distant mystery. Aiden had heard stories growing up, whispers about the old church and the strange things that happened there long before he was born. The older residents, the ones who still remembered the town's history, would occasionally talk in hushed tones, but they never said much, as if the church and what happened there was something that had been better left untouched. The town seemed to operate under a mutual agreement. Some things were better left in the dark. But now, as Aiden walked toward that same darkness, he felt an unsettling certainty settle over him. Eleanor had been here. She had found something. And now, it was his turn to uncover the truth. The trees began to close in around him as he ventured deeper into the forest, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal hands. The path became narrow and overgrown, the ground soft underfoot from the damp earth. As he walked, his mind raced, playing back the days and months after Eleanor's disappearance. The police had found nothing, no signs of struggle, no clues as to where she had gone. But Aiden had always suspected there was more to it, something that the authorities had missed, something that the town itself had refused to acknowledge. And now, with a map in his hand and Eleanor's journal in his mind, he was walking into the heart of it. He eventually came to a clearing, the dense trees parting to reveal a forgotten structure, the old church. It stood in eerie silence, its stone walls weathered and cracked by years of neglect. The roof had caved in long ago, and ivy crept up its sides, overtaking the structure like a living thing. The windows were dark, their glass shattered, and the front door hung loosely on its hinges, as if the church had been waiting for someone to come and disturb its quiet slumber. Aiden hesitated for a moment, the cold air prickling against his skin, but the pull of the map, of his sister's words, was too strong. He stepped forward, pushing the door open with a creak that echoed through the hollow space. Inside, The air was thick with dust and the smell of decay, but there was something else, something ancient, almost palpable, that filled the room like a presence. The church was no longer just a building. It was a place that held secrets, dark ones that had been buried here long ago. As he made his way through the room, his eyes scanned the walls, which were covered in faded symbols, strange runes that seemed to twist and writhe the longer he looked at them. They were the same symbols he had seen in Eleanor's paintings, symbols that had once seemed like nothing more than abstract art. But now, they felt like a warning. He stepped further into the church, his footsteps echoing in the empty space, and that's when he saw it. A large, cracked altar at the far end of the room, its surface worn smooth from years of disuse. The altar was surrounded by more of the strange symbols, etched into the stone floor. They formed a pattern, a pathway leading directly to the altar. Aiden's heart pounded in his chest. This was it. This was what Eleanor had been searching for, the truth she had uncovered. But now that he had found it, he realized the question wasn't whether he could uncover it. It was whether he could survive it. He approached the altar cautiously, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of movement, any sign that he wasn't alone. The air grew colder and the silence seemed to deepen until it was all-encompassing. And then, just as Aiden reached the altar, the whisper came again, soft, barely audible but unmistakable. "Leave." Aiden froze, his blood running cold. The voice had come from nowhere, but it was unmistakable. Someone or something was here, and it wasn't about to let him uncover the truth. Aiden's pulse quickened as the whisper reverberated in the stillness of the church. His breath hitched, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. For a moment, the weight of the room pressed down on him so heavily, he felt like he might suffocate. The air grew colder, more oppressive, and the darkness seemed to draw in closer around him. The voice had been faint, like a distant breath carried by the wind. But it wasn't the wind. It had been something else, something that knew he was here. His eyes scanned the church's empty interior, the shadows stretching unnaturally long across the floor. But there was no one in sight. "Leave," the voice repeated, this time louder, sharper, echoing off the walls, sending a chill through his spine. Aiden's hand instinctively moved toward the flashlight in his jacket pocket, but he knew it wouldn't help. The darkness here wasn't just physical. It was something deeper, something that had been buried beneath the surface for years, something that had been waiting for him, just like it had waited for Eleanor. He hesitated, tore between fear and the overwhelming compulsion to uncover the truth. His sister had come here. She had found something in this very place, something that had drawn her in, just as it was drawing him now. She had painted it, documented it, and left behind a trail of cryptic notes. But what had she truly discovered? What had she seen that had led to her disappearance? "Clara," Aiden whispered, her name slipping from his lips like a prayer. He could almost feel her presence here, a lingering echo in the room, urging him to continue, to find the answers she had never found, to finish what she had started. Aiden moved toward the altar, stepping carefully over the strange symbols etched into the stone floor. The room seemed to hold its breath as he approached, the silence becoming deafening. His flashlight flickered, casting long shadows that danced on the walls, distorting the shapes of the symbols. They seemed to shift before his eyes, as if the markings were alive, pulsing with a power that was both ancient and terrifying. When he reached the altar, Aiden felt an almost magnetic pull toward it. The surface was cracked and worn, as if it had been used for rituals long forgotten. His fingers brushed against the stone, cold and smooth, and a strange sensation coursed through him. The air around him seemed to hum with an energy he couldn't quite understand, but it was undeniable. The mansion, no, the church, wasn't just a building. It was a vessel for something far darker, something that had been contained here for centuries. He knelt beside the altar, his breast shallow, his hands trembling as they hovered over the surface. As he did, his eyes caught sight of something unusual, a piece of paper, yellow with age, tucked between cracks of the altar. It was folded neatly, as though someone had placed it there with great care. Aiden's heart raced as he carefully pried the paper loose, unfolding it with delicate fingers. The writing was familiar. It was Eleanor's handwriting. His breath caught in his throat as he read the words. "The truth is here. The relic, the one they sealed away, is inside. They think it's safe, but I hear it. I hear it whispering in the walls." It wants to be free. It calls to me, and it will call to you too. I don't know how long I can stay away from it. The word sent a cold shiver down his spine. Eleanor had written this, written about something inside this very church, something that had been sealed away, a relic. What had she meant? And why had she been so drawn to it? Was this the truth she had discovered? Was this what had led her to disappear? As Aiden read on, he found more words scribbled hastily at the bottom of the page. It's the music. The music is the key. I can hear it in my dreams. It's coming closer. The last line felt like a dagger to his heart. The music. Eleanor had been obsessed with music. Her compositions were filled with emotion, but they were also filled with something else, something he couldn't name. And now, it seemed that this music was the key to unlocking whatever was hidden in this place. Aiden's mind raced as the pieces started to fall into place. The symbols, the music, the relic, it was all connected. But what was the relic? What had Eleanor uncovered that was so dangerous? Suddenly, the floor beneath him groaned, as if the building itself was shifting. The whispers grew louder, filling the room with a dissonant chorus of voices. Aiden's heart pounded as he looked around in panic. The church, the altar, the symbols, it all seemed to be alive, as though the very foundations of the building were awakening. Aiden stood, his legs unsteady beneath him, and his eyes were drawn to the back of the church. There in the shadows, something moved. He wasn't alone. A figure emerged from the darkness, tall and imposing, cloaked in shadow. The man stepped forward slowly, his presence filling the room with an undeniable sense of dread. His face was hidden beneath the hood of his cloak, but there was something about him that made Aiden's blood run cold. He felt like he had seen this figure before, though he couldn't place where. The figure spoke, his voice low and gravelly, as though it had not been used in years. "You've come too far," he said, his voice echoing through the church, reverberating the walls like a living thing. Aiden's breath caught in his throat. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice shaky but firm. The man didn't answer at first. He simply stood there, his eyes, now visible, glinting with an unsettling intensity. It was as though he was studying Aiden, sizing him up. "Your sister knew too much," the man said finally. "She uncovered what was meant to remain hidden. And now you've disturbed it." Aiden felt his legs weaken, but he stood his ground. "What is it? What did she find?" His voice was a whisper, but the urgency in it was unmistakable. The man's lips twisted into a thin, cold smile. "She found the truth, and now you will too. But the question is, can you handle it?" The figure stepped closer, and Aiden felt a cold chill race up his spine. The shadows around him seemed to grow, the walls closing in, and in that moment, Aiden realized that he was no longer just uncovering his sister's past. He was stepping into something much darker, something that had been hidden away for far too long. The truth was no longer just mystery. It was a force waiting to consume him. Aiden stood frozen, his mind spinning with the words of the cloaked man. The truth. His sister, Eleanor, had been searching for it, and now it seemed he was about to uncover as well, whether he was ready or not. His heart pounded in his chest as a cold, oppressive air seemed to close in around him, suffocating him with the weight of what he was about to face. The figure in the shadows took another step forward, his movement slow and deliberate, as if he were savoring the moment. Aiden's instinct screamed at him to run, but something deeper within him, something that had been buried beneath years of grief and unanswered questions, urged him to stay. Eleanor had been here. She had uncovered something that had destroyed her, and now it was his turn to understand why. "You can't run from this," the man said, his voice carrying an eerie calm. "No one can. Not once you've come this far." Aiden clenched his fists, trying to steady his breath. "Who are you?" he repeated, his voice stronger now, but still betraying a fear that was beginning to claw at him. "What do you know about Eleanor? About what happened to her?" The man's eyes, dark and cold, locked onto Aiden's, as though searching for something within him. "I knew your sister," he said, his words dripping with an unsettling certainty. "She was drawn to the music. She didn't understand it, but she thought she could control it. She thought she could use it. But the music is not something to be used. It is something that uses you." Aiden felt a chill run down his spine. The music. Eleanor had always been obsessed with it, composing strange melodies that filled the walls of their home. But what the man said made it sound like the music was more than just a passion. It was something dangerous, something that had a life of its own. Control? Aiden echoed, tried to make sense of the words. What are you talking about? The man took another step forward, his shadow stretching across the floor like a dark omen. The music is a key, he explained. A key to something far older than you or your sister could ever imagine. The relic. This church. It was built to keep the music sealed away. But Eleanor, she found it. She uncovered it with her art, with her music. And now you followed her. You've come for the same thing she did. The truth. Aiden felt his stomach churn, his mind reeling as the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together, but they made no sense. What is this truth? He demanded. What's inside this church? The man's smile faded, replaced by an expression of cold indifference. It's not a what, he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. It's a who, a being, a force that's been trapped here for centuries. The music is its prison, and once you hear it, once you unlock it, it will use you, just like it used your sister. Aiden's blood ran cold. The being, the force, it was something ancient, something so powerful that it had been sealed away for generations, and now Eleanor had disturbed it. Had she become a vessel for it? Had she been consumed by it? And now was it his turn? Before he could ask another question, the man turned his back to him, walking slowly toward the altar. The truth is not what you think it is, he said, his voice echoing off the crumbling walls of the church. You can't undo what's been done. The relic is awake now. It cannot be put back to sleep. Aiden's heart raced as he watched the man approach the altar. The figure moved with purpose, as if he knew exactly what to do next. The room seemed to vibrate with a low hum, a strange resonance that was not of this world. The music, the same music that Eleanor had written about, the same music she had painted, the same music that had drawn her to this place. The man reached the altar and turned to face Aiden, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling knowledge. It's inside, he said, his voice nearly a whisper, and it's waiting for you. Aiden's breath caught in his throat as he realized what the man was implying. The music, the relic, the being, everything Eleanor had searched for, everything that had led her to this church, was now calling to him. It was a force that had been waiting for centuries, sealed away in this place, and now it was free. He took a step forward, almost involuntarily, as if his body was being drawn toward the altar. His hands shook, his mind clouded with fear and confusion. He wanted to run, to leave this place behind, but the pull was too strong. He needed answers. He needed to know what had happened to Eleanor. As Aiden approached the altar, the room seemed to shift. The shadows grew longer, and the whispers, soft at first, grew louder, filling the space with a dissonant melody. It was as if the very walls were vibrating with the music, the air itself thick with strange, otherworldly energy. He reached the altar and looked down, his eyes falling on the cracked stone surface. The same symbols that had been etched into the floor were now carved into the altar, surrounding an intricate design that seemed to pulse with life. Aiden felt his heart skip a beat as he stared at the markings. They were the same symbols from Eleanor's paintings, the same ones she had drawn in her journal. It was as if everything had led him here, to this moment, to this very spot. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. The music was becoming overwhelming, filling his mind with images of dark shapes and twisted forms. Aiden's hand shook as he reached out, his fingers brushing against the cold stone. The moment his skin made contact with the surface, the room seemed to tremble, and the hum of the music reached a deafening crescendo. He gasped, his mind going blank as the air around him seemed to pulse with an energy he couldn't understand. And then, as if on cue, the voice came again, this time louder, more powerful than before. Welcome, it said, the sound like 1,000 voices whispering in unison. You've come, and now it's time to listen. Aiden stumbled back, his heart racing in his chest. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. The truth, whatever it was about to be revealed. But as the music swirled around him, as the shadows closed in, he realized one thing. There was no going back. The truth was here, and it was far darker than he could have ever imagined. Aiden's body trembled as the music swirled around him, louder, more insistent, until it seemed to fill every inch of the church. The shadows on the walls stretched impossibly long, merging into one dark mass that moved and shifted, twisting with a life of its own. His breath caught in his throat as the whispers grew into a low hum, a sound he could feel in his bones, vibrating through his chest. The voice, now louder and clearer, echoed through the room again, more than a whisper, yet not quite a shout. It seemed to come from everywhere, inside his head, inside the very walls of the church. "Listen," it urged. "Listen and you understand." Aiden's mind raced. He could feel his grip on reality slipping. The music wasn't just sound anymore. It was power. It was a force that seemed to reach out and grab him, pulling him toward the altar, toward the truth Eleanor had uncovered. He tried to fight it, tried to turn away, but the pull was too strong. It wasn't just the music. It was a feeling of presence. Something ancient, something monstrous, was alive in the walls of this place. Eleanor had been right. She had been the first to hear it, to feel it. She had uncovered the truth, but in doing so, she had awoken something that no one could control. Aiden could hear her voice, faint and distant, but unmistakable. "I couldn't control it, Aiden," she had said in one of her last journal entries. "I thought I could, but it wants me. It wants all of us. It will take everything." The music surged again, louder than before, its melody discordant, harsh, like nails scraping across stone. Aiden's knees buckled, and he collapsed to the ground, his hands pressing against the floor, as if trying to anchor himself to something, anything that could keep him from falling deeper into the darkness. And then he saw it. Out of the corner of his eye, amidst the shadows, something began to take shape, an outline of a figure, tall and impossible to define, its presence both terrifying and magnetic. It was like looking into a storm of smoke and mirrors, the edges blurring and shifting with every passing second. The figure moved, its shape distorting as it slowly approached him, its form flickering in and out of existence, as though it were not fully bound to this world. Aiden's eyes locked onto it, and suddenly he knew. He knew that this was what had been sealed away, what Eleanor had awakened, what she had been painting all along. This thing, this being, was not of this world. It had been waiting here in the darkness, sealed by the very church they stood in, and now it was free. "Stop!" Aiden shouted, his voice breaking the silence that had enveloped the room. "Stop this. I won't, I can't let go any further." But the figure didn't stop. It kept moving, its presence growing stronger, its outline becoming clearer. Aiden could hear its voice now, not in words, but in the language of the music, an ancient hum that resonated with every part of his body. The ground beneath him shifted, the room trembling as if the building itself were alive, reacting to the being's presence. The symbols on the floor began to glow, faintly at first, then with increasing intensity. Aiden tried to stand, but his legs were weak, his body shaking, as though something was holding him down, pushing him toward the altar. "Eleanor," he whispered, his voice shaking. "I'm so sorry. What did you find?" The music swelled again, and with it, the figure stepped closer. Aiden could feel the air around him grow colder, the temperature dropping so rapidly that his breath formed visible clouds in the air. The figure's face was still a blur, but Aiden could feel his eyes, its unblinking, endless eyes, locked onto him. It knew him. It had always known him. And in that moment, Aiden realized something that struck him with the force of revelation. The music was the key. It had always been the key. The relic, the church, the being, it was all tied to the music, to the sound that Eleanor had been drawn to, that had consumed her. He looked at the altar again, his eyes locking onto the symbols that were glowing brighter by the second. The music had opened the door, but it was not yet finished. There was one final note left to play, one final part of the ritual that had been set in motion the moment Eleanor stepped into this place. He had to stop it. He had to finish what she started, but this time, he couldn't let it consume him. Aiden stumbled toward the altar, the shadows stretching and twisting around him. He could feel the figure drawing closer, its presence suffocating. It was like the entire room was closing in on him, but he didn't stop. The whispers grew louder, more desperate, until they were all around him, all in his mind, all screaming at him. He grabbed the edge of the altar and, with all the strength he could muster, he pressed his palm against the glowing symbols. The moment his skin touched the stone, the room erupted in a deafening roar, a collision of sound and silence that rattled his bones. The music reached its peak, its final note crashing through the church, and for a split second, Aiden felt as though his very soul was being torn apart. The figure, this ancient being, screamed, a sound that was not of this world, as if it were being dragged back into the depths from which it had come. And then silence. The room was still. The music faded, leaving only the sound of Aiden's labored breath. His head spun, his body aching, and for a moment he thought he might collapse. But when he looked around, the figure was gone. The room was empty, save for the dim light filtering through the broken windows. Aiden stood there, his heart racing, his mind reeling. The truth was no longer a mystery. It was a burden, a weight he would carry for the rest of his life. Eleanor had been right. The truth had been too much for her. But he had stopped it. For now, he sank to his knees, exhausted, and whispered the empty room, "I'm sorry, Eleanor. I'm sorry I couldn't save you." But deep down, he knew the truth. Some things couldn't be saved. And the music would always be there, waiting just beyond the edge of his memory. The church stood silent, its shadows deepening with the retreat of the ancient force that had once pulsed within its walls. Aiden remained on his knees, the weight of what he had just witnessed pressing down on him like an unrelenting storm. The oppressive silence that followed the music's final note seemed deafening, as though the air itself had thickened, holding its breath, waiting for something else to happen. But nothing did. The echoes of the past had been stilled. For now. Aiden's hands shook as he pushed himself up from the cold stone floor. His body ached, each movement slow and deliberate, as though his very muscles were protesting what they had just endured. His heart was heavy, still beating erratically, as though it too had been caught in the web of the music, in the pull of that terrifying truth. He looked around the church one last time, his eyes lingering on the altar. The symbols had faded, the glow that had once pulsed with such power now a distant memory. The walls, though cracked and decayed, seemed more peaceful, less alive, less haunted by the presence that had once filled them. Aiden took a deep breath, exhaling slowly as he stepped away from the altar. He could still hear faint echoes of Eleanor's voice in his mind, her desperate warnings, the unspoken truths she had left behind. He could almost feel her presence, as if she were still here, watching from the shadows, urging him to move forward. He turned and walked toward the broken door, the outside world beckoning him with its stillness. As he stepped out of the church and into the cool night air, the fog from the surrounding forest wrapped around him, its damp fingers clinging to his skin. The stars above seemed distant, their light muted by the heavy mist. For a moment he thought he saw something, someone, moving among the trees, but when he blinked, it was gone. The forest was silent once more. Aiden paused at the edge of the clearing, looking back toward the church, now shrouded in darkness. He knew that what he had uncovered, what he had stopped, was only part of the story. The truth was still out there, buried beneath the town's history, hidden in the memories of those who had lived and died in Ashford. The music, the relic, the being, those things were not gone. They were simply waiting for the next person to come along and awaken them once more. But for now, Ashford was still. The forest had been sealed again, the path closed, and Aiden had done what Eleanor could not. He had broken the cycle, if only for a time. As he made his way back down the foggy road, the weight of the town's secrets heavy on his shoulders, Aiden knew that he could never truly escape them. They would follow him, as they had followed Eleanor. The truth had a way of doing that. It clung to the soul, whispered in the shadows, and lingered long after the music had stopped. He looked up at the sky one last time, the pale light of the moon cutting through the mist, casting long shadows on the ground. The fog seemed to shift, as if it were moving with a life of its own, and Aiden felt a chill crawl up his spine. The truth was never truly gone. It was merely dormant, waiting. And as long as Ashford stood, as long as the town remained, that truth would be there, waiting to be discovered again. But not by him. Not anymore. The road ahead was unclear, but for the first time in years, Aiden felt like he had a choice. He could leave Ashford behind. He could walk away from the past and the haunting whispers that would always call to him. The truth would remain buried, for now. And as he turned his back to the town and the church that had been both his curse and his salvation, Aiden walked away, knowing that sometimes the greatest act of courage was to let go. The silence that followed him was his own, and for the first time, it was enough.